And there is definitely somewhere in here a threshold.
Liberame Domine, which decodes to mean extricate me, programmer. We might dream of people and places we had never seen as vividly as if we had seen them and actually known them. We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs.
Welcome back to another episode of the Floating Universe podcast.
There's an impression of transition, and then you're propelled into the next phase.
Now, if you don't mind, can we get on with your questions?
Well, sir, I'm not sure I understand the distinction between reflexive and voluntary nerve impulses.
Very good. Since our lab work today is a demonstration of just that distinction, why don't we proceed?
Does the audio sound okay on this end?
Yeah, sounds great. It's a lot of times I don't have the opportunity to talk to people with YouTube setups or professional audio equipment. It's usually just an Apple, headphone with the mic included, or just talking into the computer with the mic, which is, I like listening to podcasts, but man, you got to be a really good guest if I'm going to have to listen to you without a microphone, because it's hard to listen to. So cool, man. So
that's true.
Like, how much time do you got? Like an hour and a half?
Yeah, that's perfect for me.
Okay, cool. I'm already recording, which is awesome. Okay, good. So let me make sure my mouth is not too dry. I literally just woke up about it's been a good amount of time to wake up, but we'll talk about it.
Yeah, you woke up early, man. Yeah.
I usually wake up.
I like the sensory deprivation tank you got behind you.
Oh yeah, it's just a picture, but thanks. I wish I was in there.
I know.
Right
Do you
now.
do that? Is that every session or every podcast you have the float tank behind you?
No, the thing is, I usually don't do video for these podcasts. It's just, you're a YouTuber. I've noticed that's kind of where your strength is. It seems with your content, like your biggest audience. I mean, I may be wrong, but it seems like YouTube is your best content and your strongest content. So
probably
it's like
TikTok, I'd say.
Oh, okay, that's
TikTok's
true.
definitely the largest audience.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. I'm not much of a TikToker.
Just do YouTube.
Every time I try to post about psychedelics on TikTok, I get banned.
Really? That's so weird.
And it's just memes too. It's not even me.
It's pretty
talking.
much all my channel.
Yeah. Okay.
That's so weird.
We'll get into that. Let me get you introduced here. Get an intro going. No all right. You ready to go?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yes, sir. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Float Universe podcast. I'm so happy tonight to have this guest. Like I talked about in previous episodes this season, I'm trying to reflect back to the audience. And with tonight's guest, multiple people have brought him to my attention, and it's through the audience that enjoys the psychedelic content that a lot of times brings me into your world, which I guess you followed me for a bit too. And I'm like, oh man, this guy's awesome. And you're 12 hours away. You're in Australia. So welcome, Trip Whip. He's big on YouTube, big on TikTok with his psychedelic themed content. How are you tonight?
Yeah, feeling great, man. It's an absolute honor to be on. I have been watching you for a long time, so I know definitely we kind of have a lot of the same thoughts, and I'm sure we'll have an awesome conversation.
Yes, sir. I was looking at your YouTube videos, and I'm like, man, we definitely do have a lot of similar things, and which is good, because I do think that there is some objectivity to a psychedelic experience, not necessarily the contents of it, but the reflective nature of your mind and your subconscious stuff, and what is God. We'll get into that. So, Trip Whip, you are in Australia. How long have you been doing this kind of psychedelic content?
So I've only been doing TikTok now for just over a year. And TikTok's like pretty much just taken over. So I'm like almost only doing TikTok at the moment, and then I'll make content for that, and then I'll kind of post onto YouTube and Instagram as well. Before that, I was doing YouTube. Geez, maybe like I started doing YouTube on and off like 5 years ago. It's been a while now.
Yeah, I love the YouTube. TikTok's good for short form. What do you got, like 3 minutes maximum? And then YouTube
Yeah,
is, this is as long as you want, basically, at this point. But you have a lot of great videos on
yeah,
YouTube, high quality content. It's you're a good
appreciate that.
speaker, and you do bring a lot of insight into psychedelic experiences. And there is a decent amount of psychedelic content, but online. But it's interesting with TikTok. I've tried, and I've just done it through memes. And I think what it is the tagging on TikTok. What do you tag your videos with, or do you tag them?
I mean, I'm pretty like, I'm like, I don't really hide too much on TikTok. I have a pretty heavy disclaimer on there, but I've definitely found TikTok is a lot more kind to me than YouTube when it comes to posting psychedelic content. I've posted like, a live DMT experience of one of my friends doing it for their first time, and literally was quite honest about how they had a very positive experience. I didn't hide the fact that it was DMT. I tagged, DMT TikTok, all that sort of stuff. And it was reported and it was taken down. And then I actually had it like appealed, and they put it back up, and they were fine with that sort of content on my channel. So I think I do, maybe it's the disclaimer that I put in there, just telling people
Yeah,
not to do anything illegal. But yeah, I don't know. TikTok's been way more kind to me than YouTube, much more kind.
it's very interesting, all these different apps. My big thing is Instagram. I've tried to break into TikTok, and for whatever reason, it may be that I'm an American. It may be I'm just, yeah, I'm not putting a disclaimer. And a lot of the memes, they're jokes, but if you aren't reading into them correctly, you could argue that they are encouraging relatively dangerous things. So yeah,
Right.
and then I saw for a while there you had a video on YouTube. It was like, because YouTube and Instagram, like 4 or 5 years ago, they were going after this psychedelic DMT, LSD. You couldn't tag DMT. You couldn't tag a lot of these things on Instagram. The hashtag LSD or
True.
DMT would
Right.
be, blocked. You couldn't see the content. So it's a hard world to navigate.
Right.
I have a hard time sometimes.
Yeah.
Pushing these, not necessarily pushing these things, but being their champion. So why did you start, and tell us your story? How did you get into psychedelics and then deciding, hey, I'm going to share my experiences with the rest of the world? Because you're global at this
I
point
think
too. I mean,
in a
oh, sorry, you're in Australia, by the way. People that can't
yeah.
understand. I'm at 5 o'clock in the morning here to do this interview. You're 5 p.m. over there. And that's how excited I was. I'm like, I got to get this. I got to talk to this guy, and we've been trying now for a few weeks to figure out the time. But yeah, how did you get
We
into
got it
this
down.
world of doing psychedelics and then saying, you know what, I want to share this with literally the entire world?
Um, I think for me it was because I was just extremely frustrated. When I started, it was kind of an accident. Like I just started smoking like weed. I think I was trying to get with a chick, and she was like smoking weed at the time. So I like literally just smoked weed to kind of get closer to her. And I had some like interesting experiences with that, but nothing out of this world. And then I had a group of friends come over, and one of them invited this like stranger, and he was smoking weed, or what I thought was weed. And he was just like encouraging everyone to do it, and I could see him like rocking back and forth as he's like just had this really big hit, and I was like, this looks like some strong stuff. I've got to try it. Tried it, and it was synthetic weed, as it turned out. And it was just so beyond anything I'd ever experienced in my life. And I didn't really get anything, any profound insights from it or anything like, I would say, like, I didn't develop a healthy mindset from that experience or anything. It wasn't, something I didn't really see much point in investing in, like researching. But it was so out of this world that it just like completely humbled me. And I just thought that that sort of experience I had at that time would be impossible. So after that, I really wanted to just start trying different psychedelic experiences or psychedelics, and just seeing how different, the experiences were, what sort of different experiences you could have. And I wasn't in the healthiest mindset back then. And I was trying just different stuff. And eventually, in fact, I wasn't even trying to get, try different psychedelics. I didn't know that psychedelics were as special as they were. I was just trying different drugs. And eventually I found LSD. And as soon as I found LSD, I remember it was like this hit of just like, I could see the beauty around me for the first time, it felt like. And I could just see all these unhealthy patterns that had been forming in my life. And it was like that moment, it just felt like the train tracks, realigned and I was put on a different path. And just started, just going after a much healthier lifestyle, much healthier mentality. And basically after that point, I kind of just stuck to the more traditional psychedelics, LSD, mushrooms, DMT, and things like that, a few different research psychedelics. And yeah, that ever since then, that was like, that may have been like 8 years ago, 7 years ago. And put me on a completely different path. And it was just so fascinating. I had to talk about it. Unfortunately, here in Australia, I had nobody who wanted to talk about it, in my circle. And so pretty much that's why I went on to YouTube. I just made a couple of videos about my experiences. And I was really surprised about the reception. I was definitely expecting a lot more resistance, or at least, nowhere near as many people to relate to the sort of experiences I was having. I thought, they were kind of more unique than they were. And as it turns out, there's a whole community of people having the exact same experiences. And that got me addicted to also creating psychedelic content, because I just love that connection with the community.
What I like about you is you're not, you don't come off as the stereotypical druggie. And, no homo, but you're a fairly attractive looking man. You got some nice symmetrical features. You're not got long hair out down to your ass.
Thanks,
You're not wearing tie-dye shirts. You know what I mean? You're not the stereotype of the typical high level psychedelic drug user. I'm not either, but
Right.
I think I fit a little bit more into the mold than you do. So yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of courage to talk about these things. I got two questions. Well, I'll ask the first question. Were you concerned that, because when I first started floating, I'd done psychedelics prior, but I never really had given them the space they really needed, because, prior to the float tank, I didn't have a lot of stillness. I didn't have a lot of what it takes, I think, to really get,
Yeah.
the best out of the psychedelics, which is a stillness, a calmness, and a non-judgmental, open attitude towards it. And so once I just got into floating, that just opened all the rest of this stuff up for me. What was I going to say? Yeah. Luckily, this isn't live.
You're right.
My brain's still waking up. So, so what were you doing as a job? I was concerned, like I was saying, that I had discovered this stuff. I had a job where I was exposed to the public, and I was a wedding photographer, and I was posting this stuff online, and I wanted to be able to share the experiences with the float tank and the psychedelics, but I didn't want to scare away my, normie audience of clients, exactly, or potential clients that are like, we're going to hire this guy for our wedding to do pictures, and we want to make sure that he's not going to be high, or he's going to make sure he's going to be there. We don't want to associate with a druggie. So for me, I had to create Float Universe initially because I was like a secret identity where I could talk about these things without the repercussions of, the social stigma and just the attitude towards it. What were you doing prior to this trip whip experience and character? And have you faced any backlash, being a proponent of psychedelic drugs?
Funnily enough, I was working at a sensory deprivation tank.
Place.
I was just like,
I got goosebumps on that one. Yeah.
That's where I was working when I started.
Where were you working?
Yeah. So, I worked at a place called Beyond Rest.
Okay.
Here in Perth.
Yeah, I know. I don't know them personally, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah. So,
cool. Awesome.
So,
yeah.
okay. So that's, go ahead.
Oh, no. Well, I was just going to say that, like, as you can imagine, I wasn't too concerned about, the people I was working with seeing my sort of content. In fact, I was showing them.
Right. Okay.
So,
well, what about your family then, I guess? Did they have any concerns, or, like, hey, we don't want to be related to you now?
I've always been, it's very hard for me to kind of, that was one of the reasons why I had to make the video, just because I find it hard to kind of not talk about the stuff I'm passionate about. I'm kind of like annoying like that. Like, I'm not the same anymore because probably I've got this stuff to vent on. But back then, I just wanted to talk about it, so I didn't really care that they weren't into it. Like I was kind of that annoying dude shoving psychedelics down people's throats. Like you've got to try it. Like I was talking to my mom, I was talking to my dad about it, and they all thought, of course, I was just like, addicts and or an addict, and I was like going down a very dark and dangerous path. But I don't know. I was quite like, I've always had this this feeling of like if what I'm doing doesn't resonate with somebody or like a particular path, and that's not the path for me, or that's not the person to be in my life, like I want to be able to express myself honestly with the people I'm around. And yeah, I mean, my mum eventually saw the videos because my uncle saw it on his page. He was kind of into the spirituality and stuff, so he sent it to her. And she ended up giving me a call, and she was like, "Jack, I'm so proud of you. Like, I didn't realize that there's a community of people who, have," she didn't quite phrase it like this, but basically it was like, I didn't realize that you're not like the only person going through this. You're not as crazy. And so she ended up buying, how to change your brain with psychedelics, just researching it herself. And now she's been saying for a long time that she wants to try acid, and she hasn't, but she's kind of obviously converted to realizing how, the potential of psychedelics. So yeah, I wasn't really ever afraid of the backlash, and I haven't really received that much. I just now currently just do a little bit of support work on the weekends, and then I'll do the rest of the money comes from TikTok work, and that's that's kind of where I'm at. So it's been smooth sailing so far.
Awesome. So you're supporting yourself fully with all your psychedelic content, or do you have a part-time job or a full-time job?
I've got a part-time job with like that. That's the support work, like working with disabled people. I'll do that. Yeah, I'll do that on the weekend. Not like I could do TikTok full-time, but I think like, I don't know, like you have to really go into like sponsorships and stuff like that. And I like, being able to just kind of promote stuff that I actually use myself. So at the moment, I'm happy with the level it's at.
Yeah, it's tough to create a financial, a strong, consistent financial, lifestyle with psychedelic. You're just talking about psychedelics constantly. It kind of gets old after a while. It's kind of a, I keep going around the track, and I see new things. I learn where the bumps are, and I smooth it out a little bit more as I talk about these things. But I keep reaching for like content for like the DMT jesters and stuff like that. But before I get into the heavy psychedelic stuff, because you've got a lot of great topics we can talk about, now that you brought up the float tank stuff, I didn't realize that this was a part of your journey, and it sounds like to me it preceded the trip whip experience. So what got you into floating initially?
Well, I was already into psychedelics when I started floating. And for me, I just literally I got it as a present for my mom's birthday. Got one for myself, took it to the float tank place, and then everybody there was just talking about psychedelics. Like as soon as I walked in, they were kind of like, "Have you had do you know what to expect in the tank?" I said no. They started talking to me about it, and they said basically if you've had acid, you kind of will know what to expect a little bit. And then I was like, started talking to them about that, and then just had a float, came out and just chat for like a few hours about trips and stuff. But yeah, no, I've definitely got a lot of experience with sorry, I forgot what I was saying, but I will say these definitely the floating communities and the psychedelic communities, I feel like you're going to have a lot of crossover there, because you either enter very similar headspaces, or you can kind of also combine the two as well, and have some very interesting experiences.
Right. So for those that don't know, or maybe just hearing about float tanks for the first time, this is a float tank behind me. You go to a float center, and they're usually at least 3 or 4 in every metropolitan area. And there's usually at least 1 or 2 within an hour's drive of you, even if you're in the countryside. And so what it is, you can see it's 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt, give or take. I mean, I guess it's kilograms or whatever in your neck of the woods, but it's 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt heated to 93.5 degrees Fahrenheit. And there's about 350 gallons of water. So it's a very rich Epsom salt solution. It's very therapeutic on the basic physical level, I tell people the main thing
Yeah.
you'll experience the first time is deep relaxation. You'll feel very soft, and you may, you may have a trip, you may go somewhere, you may have a spiritual experience. But I try to, my rule with, doing floats over the past, I don't know, 10, 15 years now is, no, it's been 10 years. I started in 2014. Is to have no expectations with the float. Let it just happen. Don't think that it's going to be a Joe Rogan experience the first time, because that's a high expectations is a good way to set yourself up for failure and to never want to do it again. So, how many
Yeah.
times have you floated?
I mean, I was working there. We got it for free, so I
Right. Oh,
floated
that's
a lot.
right. How long did you work
Yeah.
there?
Um, I probably worked there for 3 years, maybe. And yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
I
you
mean,
you 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 floated hundreds of times then probably.
yeah, yeah, for
That's
sure.
that's awesome. So I didn't know that about you. So that's a really cool bonus. Did you have any float tank videos in your
Yeah,
on your YouTube? I didn't. I looked, but I didn't watch every video. I don't
I
know if
don't
you
think I
had.
do.
I didn't think you did either.
No, no, no. I never did I think our like Beyond Rest was a little bit apprehensive about kind of relating to psychedelics, so
Right.
they didn't want to be associated with psychedelics. And I don't know, I could have made a video just about the floats itself, but yeah, I
Yeah.
should have. I should
I,
have, but yeah, I never did.
I've experienced a lot of that in the float community since I started this float universe character, which was a lot of float centers would love for people to ignore the whole history of float tanks, which is basically centered around
Right.
psychedelic drug use, which John Lilly, by the way, the people that don't know what float tanks are,
Yeah.
this is the guy that invented this in the 50s. And he invented it with the primary purpose of separating your brain from as much external stimulation as possible, to try to just remove everything. And what would happen to the brain without any kind of input? It's a very hard state to achieve. And, I tell people a good float experience can be like you've been a meditator in a cave for 20 years. You can get to that level of experience very quickly through the power of the isolation and the stillness. And so I've never ignored the fact that John Lilly was doing acid and ketamine and all these other psychedelics in the float tank, and it has a huge history of it. But I'd say at least half of the float industry, and at least coming at me for the content I've produced, upset about it because it's promoting psychedelics, which some people don't agree with ultimately, and I can appreciate that. But really, I think it's about they don't want people coming into the float center on mushrooms or acid and throwing up or having a bad time, or because I've had that happen where I ran a float center.
Yeah.
I lived at a float center for 2 years, and I only had a handful of experiences. Most of the time, it was people on edibles where they would just pass out in the tank, and it was very hard to wake them up to the point of opening the door and
Right.
knocking on the tank. And then I had I think
Yeah.
two experiences where a guy came in on mushrooms, and the mushrooms, you don't know what's going to happen. If it's 2 grams or 5 grams, it could be nothing, or it could be you're on the ground crying and sweating. And so I had a few experiences where people would come in, the mushrooms weren't kind to them, or they took too much. They didn't time it correctly. And so I'm trip sitting
Yeah.
customers, and I didn't like that, because I've got a business to
Yeah.
run, and I've got a guy in the back room just
Yeah.
having a bad time. So I've had a lot of backlash
Yeah.
for promoting the float with psychedelics, but I can't help it. That's the truth. And that's why I resonate with your content. I think that's why you're a leader in the psychedelic community, is you are coming from a place of truth. It's a subjective truth, but nonetheless, it's a truthful thing. And in a world full of lies and inversion, it's always nice to hear the truth, even if you're not 100% correct. I mean, the thing is, what do how many trips do you think you've done now of, heavy DMT, heavy LSD, heavy mushrooms? I'm talking 2 or 3 tabs or more, 4 or 5 grams more.
Yeah.
How many balls to the wall trips have you had?
Um, so my most intense trips would have been in the early days when I had 4 very intense synthetic weed trips. They were like when I was in that unhealthy state in the beginning. Then I'd say I had a lot of acid trips. The problem is, I find that meditation enhances the trips like exponentially.
One
So it's
hundred
like,
percent. Yes.
yeah, yeah. So I've had very heavy trips on like a higher dose of acid when where like more stuff has happened. You know what I mean? I've gone out and done stuff, but then I've probably actually gone to a deeper place on like one tab just meditating.
Hmm.
But besides the meditation, I'd say I've had maybe four very intense acid trips. Um, and on DMT, I'd say I've only had three intense ones. And mushrooms, I don't think I've ever had a really intense one. Maybe one like medium heavy.
Hmm. It's
Oh,
quite
and then
an
I would say I did. Sorry, I did. I was gonna say I mixed acid and mushrooms as well. That was one of the intenser ones.
it's quite an undertaking to throw yourself into this at the mercy of the psychedelics because you never know what's going to happen. Now, I have a theory, and I feel like after watching your content, you have a very similar theory. My theory is we all have a relative state of density, and some of us are much thicker than other people. And when I say thicker, you could say that's maybe unconsciousness. So the more unconscious you are, the more dense you are, the more psychedelics you're going to need to wake up. Whereas if you are a very high
Right.
frequent if you're a very high frequency being to start with, right? Let's say you've never done psychedelics, but you've lived a good life, you've had, your grace and you've practiced certain spiritual things, maybe even unknowingly doing it, like a breathing practice or just connecting to God in a certain way,
Yeah.
being more conscious in general, you have a higher frequency. And
Yeah.
so when you have that higher frequency, my theory is you need less to experience the same thing. Whereas, like for example, first, let's say you're like
Exactly.
a yogi that's been doing all this work and meditating and not using any substances, and you take one tab of acid and you are beyond the moon. But if you are a dense person, you've lived an
Yeah.
unconscious lifestyle, you eat bad food, you drink alcohol heavily, all lower frequency things. That same one tab of acid isn't going to take you as far. And that's why I think the float tank is a major part in psychedelic journeying
Mm,
because it's an equalizer that can take a person that doesn't have much meditative experience. For example, I think you like LSD as much as I do. LSD is a meditator's drug. I feel like you get more out of LSD the more
I
you can
agree.
the more you can center yourself and go within.
100%. Yeah,
So yeah. So it
yeah,
sounds like you do have the same like kind of understanding.
definitely. I feel that like I'll see a lot of people in the comments kind of like boast about how much acid they can take and like not be affected by it. And like in all fairness, like there's no way I could do what they're doing. Like I couldn't have that much acid and just like have a normal conversation with my friends. But at the same time, I do know that when I began my journey, my tolerance was definitely at its highest. Like it's not that, I became more tolerant over time. It's kind of, in my opinion, at least with my experience, it's probably different with everyone, or at least a lot of people. But for me personally, it was a skill that I had to develop in order to be able to kind of access, I guess you'd say, deeper states whilst on psychedelics. Like when I began meditating, if I took two tabs of acid, I would go nowhere near as, deep as I can now just by taking one tab of acid and meditating. I wouldn't be even close. I could probably just smoke weed and go deeper than I used to be able to on two tabs while meditating because you learn how to just let go and you learn how to like as you see confronting stuff still just be at peace and let go, and the more capable of just being at peace and letting go, like the more capable you are of doing that, the deeper you can go, because you'll just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper until eventually it gets too much where you're like, okay, like this is I'm on a DMT trip right now, I got to open my eyes sort of thing. So yeah, that's how I always looked at it. But I know that there are probably people out there who like um go to those deep states and are still able to maintain a normal conversation with somebody on a high, on a
Mhm.
high dose or something. And in that case, I'd say that probably is worth like bragging about, because I definitely couldn't do that. No way.
Yeah. I kind of discovered this through weed, which was I'm like, how am I? Well, first of all, I did notice, like you, I came into the psychedelic experience balls to the walls, like I love it, and I could take a ton, and I would experience a decent amount of stuff. But as I progress spiritually, I almost don't even want to do them anymore.
Yeah.
The main reason I didn't want to do them is because the past probably 3 years, I've had peak marijuana addiction, like very high dose. I mean, an eighth of weed a day. I'm spending four or
Wow.
five, yeah, like $400 or $500 a month, no problem.
Right.
And it's a problem because your tolerance levels just sky high, and you don't
Yeah.
experience anything beneficial almost about it at that point. And so I started
Right.
thinking to myself, like, how is it that I, am just destroyed by smoking this amount of weed, but like maybe Willie Nelson or Snoop Dogg can smoke weed all day. Maybe that's not even true. Maybe they don't smoke as much as we think they do, right? Because I know people
Right.
think Snoop Dogg smokes a truck worth of weed every day. Maybe he really doesn't. Maybe he smokes one blunt a day. Who knows? But
Yeah.
let's say he smokes all day long. Like, how is he able to do that, right? So maybe it's his frequency. I'm not saying I'm more high frequency than Snoop Dogg or Willie Nelson, but it's like, how are certain people able to do this stuff consistently and not just get
Right.
destroyed, not, like, and it's like a medicine that I don't
Mm.
need anymore. Here's another theory I have about weed. Are you a weed smoker?
Not anymore, but I definitely used to be, for sure.
Well, here's a theory, okay, that when you are a low frequency person, like marijuana, I believe exists on its own frequency. And so if you're a low
Mm.
frequency person prior to smoking marijuana, it brings you up to the marijuana's frequency. That's why you get high,
Right.
right? But let's say you have done some work and you have, kind of transcended the marijuana frequency. To smoke weed at that point brings you down, So I don't know if this is
Mm.
just pure speculation based on my
Right. Right.
my metaphysical theories, but it seems like all these substances exist at their own frequency, of course, that you can obviously your body starts to match, I think. And so here's another theory I have, and maybe you can, disagree with this or not, but I think that
Mm.
the same kind of theory applies to psychedelics, that you take mushrooms or acid and you may be frequency wise lower than acid or lower than mushrooms. And when you take mushrooms or acid or any psychedelic, a lot of people experience tremors right on the come up. Do you experience like any kind of like physiological response to psychedelics when you take them? Like, do you shake? Do you have tremors
Uh,
on the on the come up?
sometimes, not
Like
every time, but sometimes
sweating.
definitely.
Well, my theory is
Yeah.
that physiological shift is the fact that you are now in the realm or reaching the vibrational frequency of the mushroom, and because of that your physiological like energy state starts to shift, and that's why I think people shake or they sweat. I mean, it's doing
Mm.
all kinds of things that I don't think either one of us will ever fully understand, but those are just a few of my
Right.
theories, which is your density, your consciousness definitely plays a role in where these things take you, what you get out of them. And that's why
Mm.
I support, if you're going to do psychedelics, do floating for a few reasons. Floating is going to help you become more
Mm.
calm, more relaxed, more meditative. And then also the float tank. Now, let me ask you this. I would use
Mm.
the float tank as a tool after a psychedelic trip to put myself back together. Sometimes I would blow my brains apart so
Oh, yeah.
profoundly
Smart.
it would help me ground and it would help me integrate the experience. Now, what
Yes, that's smart.
do you would you now you don't have to talk about it. I guess you work there if you want to, but what was your experience with psychedelics in the float tank, both using them during trips and then maybe after, or did you even do that? Did you ever do psychedelics in the float tank?
I did. I think actually, I'm trying to think if I maybe actually, I think I did do mushrooms in the float tank. But I'm got the timing off. Like such a missed opportunity I'm like, surely I did, but if I have, I didn't have like an experience. I really remember that vividly in the tank itself. I do
Hmm.
know that we also had this like flashing light, the Argent light,
Hmm.
and I definitely used that on psychedelics quite a few times,
Oh, that's awesome.
just
That's a
because
good
of the
thing.
ease.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to talk about that too. I
Yeah,
didn't know you had access to one of those though. The Ajna light,
that's
that's the
phenomenal.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
like the Lucia light, right? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah, it's wild, bro. On psychedelics, that was insane. Like that was so out of this world, like the open eye visuals. Um, but and same with weed, that's the thing. I did have a question when you were saying vibration, how you're saying the psychedelics put you on like a particular frequency.
Hmm.
When you say frequency, do you mean do you mind like helping me like just understand that a little bit more? Do you mean like in terms of like your mind being positive, or is it in terms of how connected you are to like your third eye sort of perspective?
When I say vibration and frequency, I'm talking about, like the rate at which your molecules vibrate at, like your energy field, like your electromagnetic field. And I also think like a frequency is like a station on a radio. Like right now we're in the human
Right,
realm,
right, right.
tuned into human consciousness, but on another station, on another frequency is Salvia divinorum and bugs, and then on another
Yeah.
frequency is
Yes.
DMT
Yeah.
jesters, right? And then, so that's what I kind of mean. Like a vibratory state is like your molecules moving, like your atoms moving at a certain speed, like your mind. It's just a either a lower state, which is like a hell realm, or a
Right.
higher state, which is more of an angelic realm. Like it's just
Okay. I
levels
get you now.
and almost like a radio station
Mhm.
in a
See,
way.
that's hard. That's hard for me to um see. For me, with my like experiences on acid mushrooms, they haven't really been like consistent. Like acid's probably been a lot more consistent for me than mushrooms. But there have definitely been trips that have been like really high, and then there have been trips that are kind of a little bit like more challenging.
Hmm.
Um, so it's kind of like even the experiences on psychedelics, just like in life, have kind of been like a little bit up and down. So for me personally, I don't know. I wouldn't say I kind of feel that you know, when I take acid or mushrooms or whatever, that I am I slip back into the same sort of frequency. Because there are even acid trips where I will like not blast off at all. Like if I take acid and I'm hanging out with some friends and they want to watch a movie, for me, I'm not going to feel that different to if I'm sober. You know what I mean? Because
Hmm.
we're kind of very much just in touch with this like social programming, and so I don't really let go of that programming. I kind of just stay as me, stay as Jack, sort of thing. Whereas if I'm meditating, it definitely is going to go somewhere else.
Well, I think that's an interesting point. But I also think that's based on how much you've taken, right? That I think there are doses where it's like you can't, it's ego dissolution is going to happen. You cannot control
Oh
your
yeah,
ego, because
yeah,
I would have experiences in the float
that's true.
tank where I'm like, I would completely dissolve into it, and it was great. But then because I took way too much, or the right amount basically. But then sometimes, like for example, I would be doing psychedelics too much, and so you'd get a little bit of a tolerance. Or sometimes the psychedelics I feel just kind of lock you out of the experience because it's just you don't need to
Mm,
be there. And
right.
so I would sometimes take either not enough, or whatever reason I wouldn't fully dissolve, and that was like really, those are the worst trips where for whatever reason I tried to let go, because you do learn initially, like that's one of the first things you learn with basic psychedelic use is you have to let go to go deeper into the trip. DMT demands it.
Yeah.
The first DMT trip I had was just these aliens screaming at me to let go.
Wow.
And then as soon as I let go, obviously then it was like the eyeball tunnel into the DMT realm.
Right.
But it's just crazy stuff, man. And you never know what you're gonna
Yeah.
get. You can't never. I've never been able to repeat a trip, and I've tried to. I've tried to set the conditions where it's like, okay, I'm going to go to the same place. So for me, like the
Mm,
ultimate takeaway for psychedelics is it's some kind of reflective experience with your psyche. Now, some
yeah.
people like let's just kind of shift gears into DMT real quick, because that's the topic I've been on for the past few weeks. And as I quit marijuana, I'm on day 10 for anybody at home playing along, following my journey. And I've basically hit a wall right now where I've smoked weed for like 12 years hardcore.
Yeah.
And as you start to quit, I'm sure maybe you've experienced this, you do hit kind of this wall where I'm exhausted. I just woke
Yeah.
up and I'm exhausted, and because my body is trying to adjust from what I've been doing to it.
Yeah.
So with psychedelics, I think, yeah, I think that's kind of like this general takeaway for me. It's a reflective experience based on your own inner self and what God, for lack of a better word, is trying to show you. So
Right.
what do you think, if you could kind of like make a blanket statement about the psychedelic experience? What is it? Now, and you do make a good point. I wanted to talk about this too. Like there is always this takeaway from acid, which is the universal connectedness of all things. It may be presented to me in different forms, but the takeaway with acid is always like we're all connected. It's all one. And we'll get into that. But I wanted to get your kind of like general theory on what are psychedelics? What are they showing us? Is there any objectiveness to it? Is it a subjective thing? Like, what do you
Right.
think? What do you think?
All right. I think what psychedelics are fantastic for is like, I can't remember what it comes from. I think it's a Buddhist thing where they talk about trying to understand nirvana. And they're like, we can't say what nirvana is, but we can say what nirvana isn't, because nirvana can't be, expressed through logic. So obviously when we have these psychedelic experiences, we come back, we have to like make sense of it, as humans in this like 3D earthly experience. And we do, we process it logically. And so I think that what psychedelics are fantastic for, and what is probably, I'd say, objective about psychedelics, is they can show you aspects of your sober experience that aren't as real as you thought they were. For me, when I started taking higher doses of acid, I was shocked to see how fundamental, like your fundamental perception of reality can just be altered so easily, and how like subjective and fragile your sensory experience itself is. Um, and for me, it just showed me, well, if like these things can be altered to the degree that they're being altered right now, then when I'm sober, like so much more of my experience is obviously a hallucination than I realized. And it's kind of gotten to the point now where I'm like, there's no way for you to know if your experience is just not 100% a hallucination or not. So,
Yes, I agree.
yeah, yeah. So I think psychedelics are really great for that. If you're somebody who's really, you know, attached to your reality and your way of looking at life, and that's not a good thing for you. Like if you kind of feel stressed, depressed, as if you kind of are not being your authentic self, you're living your life for other people. Something like a psychedelic experience can really help you just break out of that mold and realize like all of this is a lot more subjective than I realized. All of this is, for lack of a better word, a hallucination. And really, I'm a lot more free to do whatever I want than I thought I was. But, obviously, on the flip side of that is if you are somebody who's really attached to your reality and you don't want it to be like shattered, psychedelics can be very dangerous for a person like that. They can, you'll be labeled as schizophrenic or something if you don't know how to integrate the psychedelic headspace and the things that you see there that feel so real. If you don't know how to integrate those into your sober reality in a healthy way, then yeah, you might feel like you're going crazy a little bit. You might feel like you're losing your grip on reality. To say whether or not what you see on psychedelics is real, the only thing I can say is they definitely feel realer than this reality. And I would say that, um, like, I think they are realer than this reality in the sense that um, they will tell you information about your sober reality, that like the entities or whatever, information you're channeling. They'll tell you stuff that really actually does manifest itself as practical advice, like just learning, it's things that can help you find inner love, accept unconditional love for yourself, forgiveness for other people. That's the sort of information you can get from these light beings and stuff like that. And it's practical information, and it's information that's so beautiful and pure that you can't necessarily get from just people on Earth.
Right.
So I would say it's realer than real, but whether or not it's objective, like the way that we experience it, I don't think we are really capable of experiencing objective reality. But like, it also comes down to that question is like, what is real? Like, real could just be a feeling in the brain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I agree, and I'm that's why I'm still like, as much as I've experienced, always coming back to, like, people will tell me something, and I'm like, wait, I have to reevaluate my own belief system based on what you've told me.
Right.
And like, for example, I've been interviewed this guy recently who's like, you know, psychedelics maybe this demonic long con, right? To be like, okay, you smoke DMT, and I'm going to give you some practical information that you can use in your life. And because of that, now I've got you hooked into the possibility that DMT is this great thing, but really it's this demonic long con. I'm just giving you a little bit of help now, so in the end, you're going to help me, push my plan. I don't know if I
Right.
agree with that, but I do. I've added that to my repertoire of, like, okay, cautionary tales of, maybe we shouldn't be doing these things. But I do agree that, my thought is, it's some kind of reflective nature. It's like a reflective funhouse mirror of your psyche that you have to kind of learn how to interpret. But I do think it's always pointing towards the answer. And this is the issue I have with a lot of people. They think that these things are a panacea, like weed that just cures everything. And I don't even think. Well, what's going on with my computer here? Oh, is that you doing that? Or is that me?
What's that?
My
What's
shit's
wrong?
my screen's just going. It's fine. It's still recording, and I still see you, so we're good. But my
Okay.
screens just started being possessed, and the video just started going all over the place.
You're
Weird.
saying something you're not meant to be saying.
I guess so. Oh, dude, I got goosebumps on that. Holy shit.
Nice.
The goosebumps to me are, it's like the confirmation of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
that's a
yeah.
conversation for another time. But
Yeah.
so I'm like, I'm really a proponent of these things, and I'm like, these things have pointed me in the right direction. And so I'm still on the fence of, is it objective good or bad? I don't think it's neither good or evil. I just think it's a fun house mirror of your psyche. And that could
Mm.
manifest as a demon, that could manifest as an angel. I would also like to point to the fact that over my many experiments with psychedelics, in both, I would consider lower states of vibrational consciousness versus higher, that, yeah, if you want to enter the demonic realm, get real low, start thinking
Yeah.
dark thoughts, and
Yeah.
you'll open up those portals. And I also agree with you. Like, if you like your life, if you like, having your eyes closed and living your materialistic lifestyle,
Oh,
don't
you just cut
don't
out.
is it okay? Don't do these things if you want to maintain your egoic hold on what you think the world is, because the minute you do DMT, all that goes out the window.
Yep.
So, no, how did you get? What was your first DMT experience like, and how did that come about?
Um, so for me, I was trying to get a hold of it for a very long time. I really, really wanted to experience it, but it was so hard to find anybody selling DMT. So anytime I'd meet somebody interested in psychedelics, I'd very quickly weave into the conversation, like, have you tried DMT before? And where did you get it from, basically? And eventually, one of my friends from school actually, and came across some DMT. And I remember I had no idea how much you're meant to smoke of the stuff. Like, I had no idea, like, what was the breakthrough dose, what was like just a kind of dipping your toes into the water thing. So all I knew is I wanted to have a breakthrough. That was just like, I had to have a breakthrough. If this was the only DMT I could ever get my hands on, I had to make sure that it was going to be as deep as I could go. So I put as much DMT into like the pipe that I had, that would, that it could still like smoke up basically. But in hindsight, it was just way too much and like unnecessary amounts, because you can't smoke it all anyway. And I, yeah, just basically inhaled like as big a toke as I could have, held it in for as long as I could. And then as soon as I blew it out, immediately after, I just ripped another one as hard as I could, as deep as I could. Like, I was just doing them as fast and as, deep as I could. And I just remember at some point it just started hitting me so much harder and faster than I expected. And I was like, okay, you know what? Like, this is a drug. This isn't a toy. This isn't a game. My reality is just like crashing around me. And I felt like a star literally imploding on itself. And I was like, oh man, okay, I wasn't expecting it like to be this intense. And I was starting to panic a little bit, but luckily I had like I could hear my inner thoughts kind of saying, don't worry, it's okay. You knew it was going to be like this. Just listen to what we're telling you. And I was like, listen to what you're telling me. Like, what do you mean? And as soon as I started just like trying to like concentrate on that and like let go of like what my body was feeling like, just like instantly entities swooped up telling me like they were like, we control you, we control everything, and like all sorts of crazy stuff. And then yeah, they just took me to the tunnel of light, and then I just became like everything for like forever. It was just like I dissolved and became white light, and I felt like I was just like the entire universe, like God, I guess you'd say. And I was that for like hundreds of billions of trillions of years. um and then when I finally came out of that, I was actually like, I remember looking around and I was like, oh crap, like I realized I'm naked and I'm outside of my neighborhood. And like 2 weeks before this trip, I'd taken a high dose of acid and I'd stripped naked and run through the streets.
Oh yeah.
And you know,
Oh yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so I got into a lot of trouble for that. And so I was like, oh fuck, like I've done it again. Like this is obviously just something I do.
Jeez,
But I
dude.
realized
Hold on. You're running down the street naked on acid, and then 2 weeks later, you're just jumping right back into the psychedelics. Wow.
I think it was maybe a month later or something like that. But
Wow.
yeah, I
Still though,
was.
dude. Jeez.
Well, it was crazy though because when I'd had that acid trip, right, during that trip, when I was outside naked, and like it was weird, bro. Like the people who were coming up to me in reality, telling me to like calm down. In that state, they were like angels, and they were coming up to congratulate me for getting on that level, and they were saying, you know, good work, like you've
Mhm.
realized like this truth or whatever. And they were telling me that I was going to enter this white light and I was going to become this white light for like ever. And it was going to happen as soon as I went back inside the house and sat on my couch. And I asked them, I was like, can I bring my friend Aiden with me, who was there when I was tripping on acid? And they're like, yeah, that's fine. Bring whoever you want. And then the ambulance came, took me away, and it didn't happen that night. But then when I did have this DMT experience, that's what happened. I was sat on the couch with my friend Aiden, smoked the DMT, went into this white light. And as I came out of it, I was back on the streets naked. But I realized after like 30 seconds, this isn't happening now. Like I'm just in a memory. I'm in the memory of when I was on acid. And as soon as I realized that, the whole reality like started crumbling around me and it restructured into another memory. And it just kept doing that over and over, literally like a scene from Inception where everything's like just recreating itself. And then it recreated itself to me just sitting on the couch with a DMT pipe. And I was like, am I still in a memory? Like this literally just feels like another memory, but I guess I'm in the present moment now. And that was the
Yeah.
trip.
That's what's
It
wild
was
about
hectic.
that. Yeah, the DMT is
Uh,
wild. It can,
yeah.
I've had people smoke DMT and it's like their experience was they died. They smoked DMT.
Yeah.
It killed them, and then
Yeah.
they went through that whole thing of what happens. At least according to their model when they die, which was you float above your body, and they literally thought they had died. And
Right.
in this death experience, though, they had come to terms and they made peace with death. So it was a very traumatic experience that
Mm,
led to be,
mm,
but ultimately healing with the because
yeah.
most people are afraid of death now. I've done so much psychedelics. I'm afraid to do some of them now, but I still will be going back very soon once I kind of clear this weed saga because the psychedelics told me they're like, look, you are wasting your fucking time coming here when you are just stoned to the bone all the time. You're not. The psychedelics are like, we're here to help you out, and the best
Mm,
advice we can give you is to stop smoking weed. And so
wow.
the all the psychedelics kind of said, we're not going to help you anymore. These trips aren't going to be any fun. You're not going to have any more insight until you heed the message, right? And so a lot of people, it's like the Alan Watts quote. It's like, okay, it's like looking through a microscope, right? And when you get the message, you go out and you kind of evaluate your findings through the microscope. You don't sit there continually with your eyeball on the microscope looking inward. You have to take this information and apply it to the outer reality, which is why I think they're there to begin with. And they're a benign substance that we make good or evil through our
Yes.
intentions. And
Yes.
I think for the most part, you agree with a lot of the, and saying you agree, it's like, I think there's a basic understanding about psychedelics that you either get or you don't get. And it's this magical trip of like, we are all one, love each other,
Yeah.
have compassion,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's like the true gift of the psychedelic experience is showing us how actually connected we are. So
Mm.
that's why acid is my favorite psychedelic. It always gives me that experience of oneness. Mushrooms to me are like alien, and I never know what I'm going to get. I don't know if it's going to be an auditory experience or it's going to be a total visual. Sometimes it's like I can hear across the country, or sometimes it's just like alien weirdness. Now, we haven't really talked about salvia. Have you ever done salvia?
I haven't. No, have you?
Yes, it's I
Wow.
think on equal footing with the bizarreness of DMT, if maybe not even more bizarre. I don't
That's
know.
what I've heard.
Did you hear the trip story about the guy that smoked Salvia divinorum? I posted it not too long ago. He smoked Salvia divinorum in his basement with his friend on Christmas Eve, and a 45-second trip turned into 8 years. His lived experience, right? He's in this basement smoking salvia, but he goes somewhere for 8 years and lives a full on life that I mean, I urge people to go look at this interview. Have you heard
Yeah.
about that? Did you hear that story?
No, I
I,
have. I mean, I've heard of that happening, but not the specific story.
so it's like, what is the nature of reality? I think we are in this perpetual dream state that for whatever reason, when we go to bed at night and come back to our life, it continues down the storyline. Now here's another interesting theory I've been really dealing with over the past few weeks is, okay, are psychedelics showing us potentially escaping the matrix or exiting samsara? Is this the truth of what is reality beyond the human experience? Or this is where I get tripped up. Let's say this is a dream we're having right now, right? The
Mm.
human experience is a dream. There's no real reality to it. And then in this dream of life, we smoke DMT, take peyote, eat mushrooms, and they take us somewhere, but still we're dreaming, right? So in our dream, we're taking drugs and then we're going somewhere. So it's like a dream within a dream. And at that point, you have to ask yourself, well, what is the reality then? What is the reality of
Right.
psychedelics? Do you think it is a look beyond into the truth of the lived of like what is beyond our five senses and perhaps the human experience and into heaven or in hell? Or is it something that we're making up within our dream? We're just going deeper within our dream. What do you think?
So, I mean, obviously, like, just a guess, but I'll definitely say that when you were there, it feels real. And it's like whenever somebody hears that who hasn't had that experience, like it's important for you to know the reason why like this reality right now feels real, or at least realer than a dream. Like when you wake up from a dream, you're like, oh, I'm back in reality. That's just like a feeling you have. You can
Hmm.
say, oh, well, this reality is consistent though, whereas my dream's chaotic. When you're in the dream, it doesn't feel chaotic to you. Like there's a sense of order when you're dreaming. And very often you have false memories when you're dreaming and stuff like that. It's just that when you wake up, you have this feeling of like everything's consistent. I have this feeling of like this is real life. When you trip, that feeling, like when you're sober, it's nothing compared to when you're tripping. When you're tripping, it's like this is real. Like this is like there was a fog when I was sober, it's been cleared, and this is real reality.
Hmm.
But logically, it's very hard for me to just kind of say, that's in terms of what's available in the entire universe, that's the ultimate place. Like maybe as human beings, that might be the ultimate place. But I was like listening to this podcast with this mathematician, Donald Hoffman, and he was talking about the fact that like they're doing these mathematical tests and it's showing that reality, like space and time itself, that this isn't real. Like it's just a product of our perception of reality, and that there's actually a deeper level of reality that you can go. Like space and time is what you see on the laptop, but then there's something beyond that, which is the circuit board and all the rest of it. So absolutely, I can imagine psychedelics are taking you to that circuit board. They're taking you to what's below this reality. It's taking you to a deeper version of it, a more like authentic version of it. But then there could be something beneath that potentially. What that would be, I have no freaking clue. But yeah.
Yeah.
What about
And
you? What do you feel?
well, I used to think DMT is what life is beyond the filter of the five senses. Like we're like these five senses of touch and smell and like vision, like we see things, but it's through a filter. And
Mm.
what's, when you do psychedelics, it's beyond not only the filter of the five senses, but then I'm sure you've learned this with consciousness and ego, that you have a certain, and I mean, this is just a Taoist secret. Like, if you wish to see the truth, hold no judgment, right? And through our
Right.
judgment also creates this filter that, like, I'm going to receive information, but my judgment's going to filter some of these things out to the point where you might not even see something. Like this famous video of like people dancing, right? And then in the middle of the video, like, there's a gorilla in the middle of the people dancing, and like half the people don't even realize there's a gorilla in the video,
Oh
because
yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
because
That
of
one, yeah.
because they're how they're perceiving it, what their judgments have attuned them to, like, perceive
Yes.
things a certain way. But the whole time these things are in front of us, and so
Yeah.
it's like, that's like consciousness. Was it always there and I didn't see it,
Right.
or am I just tuned in differently now to the frequency where it exists? Like, that's my
Yes.
issue with reality creation and psychic phenomenon. I used to debate this constantly. I'm like, am I psychic, or am I sensing something that's already existing? You know what I mean? Like, am I creating something? Or actually, it was like psychic phenomenon versus manifesting. Am I manifesting these things, or are they just on this timeline to exist, and I'm cognizant of the fact that they're coming? Like, I'm psychic to the
Right.
fact that they exist, or did I create them? Did I think them
Right.
into existence through feeling and emotion and thought? So that's why I'm still on
Yeah.
this journey. The ultimate conclusion I have is enjoy the mystery. There's things we're never going to understand, or we're not meant to understand. It's like Terence McKenna talks about a termite, or trying to understand its place in the universe, next to a human, right? Well, that's a huge leap between a termite and a human. Imagine a god, human and God. And one of the greatest takeaways an immediate takeaway, and I talk about this before, which is like Stanley Kubrick, the filmmaker, and
Mm.
making The Shining. He's like, this is a positive movie because the implication of Ghost says that there is some kind of afterlife, right? That it's not just
Right.
death, right? It's not just death
Yeah.
and an emptiness to it.
Yeah.
There is a potentiality that there's something does exist, and so by virtue, it's potentially positive. And I'm always thinking like that, and trying to be open and not judge, and I want to keep engaging the mystery. And so I think there's a few things that psychedelics do provide. They are a window into your psyche. They do, like I said with the ghost thing. The minute you take psychedelics and you go to another realm, or you're presented with a demon, like, that's the thing. I know a lot of atheists that have been turned into believers because they took DMT or because they took mushrooms, and they said, you know what? There's nothing to this reality. It's just scientifically, it's all measurable. We've discovered everything. We understand everything. There's no mystery. And I don't believe in God, angels, and demons. It's just superstition and silly stuff. But the minute they do a heavy dose psychedelic experience and they experience another reality, or they, again, talking to whatever they perceive as God or a
Yeah.
demon, then, their whole worldview has to change, because it's like, wait a minute, I was wrong. And so as much as I am like hesitant to promote these things, they do awaken people to their own internal suffering and why and how they got there, which is my story, and also the possibility that God exists, and then to explore that, I think, is a great thing. So let me ask you this: prior to your psychedelic journeying, where were you with God? What do you think
Mm.
God is? And then after psychedelics, did it reveal God to you? Did it, what was the journey there with the spiritual aspect of the psychedelic use?
So, I mean, I was one of those atheists that you were describing before using psychedelics. I was like closed off to anything that was spiritual, anything that was religious. I was, if it's not science, it's not provable, it's not testable, then what's the point of even discussing it? Like, I was extremely arrogant, extremely closed-minded. And that's why, even though the first proper psychedelic experience I had was synthetic weed, which is definitely not a drug that I'd ever advocate for anybody. It's
Yeah, same here. K2, I would definitely stay away from that.
yeah, I like literally I thought I was gonna die on one of those trips. Um, but I had an experience which was just so outside of anything that I thought was possible. And, because I was so arrogant, it was just like this insane, humbling experience. And it wasn't religious. there wasn't any aspect of me that got in touch with God, and it didn't. I don't think that trip itself stopped me from being an atheist, but it did show me, okay, there are experiences that are beyond what we could, what I thought was possible. And that opened my mind up a little bit. And eventually I got my hands on LSD, which, as I was saying before, just changed my, my mentality and like made me a much more positive person. But it didn't immediately show me God or break my, just make me more open-minded. It took a while. And eventually I had a trip. I was somebody who needed more acid than most to kind of get me deeper because I was, just very blocked. And then eventually it happened. Eventually I had an experience just that was, I could only describe it as, religious sort of thing. And I had a sense of God, and it was like a conscious order to the universe. And, if I was in high school hearing me talk right now, I'd be like, bro, don't touch drugs. Like, it's obviously made you crazy, like it's just something you
totally.
can't understand, but when you have that experience, it's just so beyond logic, and it's just so beyond words, but you just feel it. And it's literally poetic in that, like, it is a feeling that you get that can only exist between the words and between the lines, because it's like, it's just so beyond comprehension, but it's so beautiful. And it changed my life, and it made me feel that connection that you're talking about with everybody. It was like the sense that we are all God inside, and we're all one, and we're literally just the same thing, having different experiences from different point of views. So, of course, that it grew and developed my empathy as well. And it just, in this like one, in just with one substance, it converted me from being this hardcore atheist, science is the only thing, to like, we know nothing for certain. And and like the way I'm looking at life now is pretty religious, and I'm very open-minded to religion itself. Like, I could very easily go to church. I have gone to funerals. I went to one recently, and they're reading out, a quote from Psalms, and I'm absolutely resonating with it, and I'm absolutely relating it to my DMT experiences and stuff. So yeah, it's definitely converted me from an atheist to somebody who believes in some version of God or another. It's hard to put a label on whatever that is, because it's
Right.
everything and nothing. But
So prior to this, you were basically an atheist. Did you grow up Christian or anything? Or were your parents the same way? Like, did you not grow up in any kind of spiritual upbringing?
I mean, I went to Catholic schools,
Okay.
but neither of my parents were religious.
Right.
Yeah, so I
Because
was surrounded by it.
that was my issue initially, was how can I reconcile this with Christ, right? And the truth of, or is it truthful? Is there a truthful basis to any of these things? And, after studying a lot of these major world religions / philosophies, I've come to the conclusion, my personal belief is, we all have the spark of divinity inside of us. We are all one. I think what's happening with these religions is, and we'll use Christianity as an example. I think Christ is the Son of God. I think everything he's saying is true. I think it's a lot of it's coded in esoteric, wording and ideas. And he's presenting, like, Jesus is teaching the Tao, which is the way, right? Jesus is the truth, the way, and the light. The Tao is translated as the way. And so I think Jesus is the ultimate teacher, that he even says in the Bible, even the least amongst you will be greater than me. You'll do greater things than me. Jesus literally says that in the Bible as the Son of God, right? And so my understanding is, these people come to earth. Like, if people want to understand how I feel about Jesus Christ, watch The Last Temptation of Christ. I think it's somebody that had a peak spiritual experience beyond. I mean, I think these like the Buddha and Jesus, and I think when you have a peak spiritual experience, especially a prolonged one like that, it's painful. Like, you reach a frequency where human existence is not fun, and but you're walking on water, and you're doing all these things, and you're giving the masses what they need to hear. You're this ultimate teacher, and so I think as we move through time, we like, the humanity is becoming less dense in general, and so this is why, if you look back through history, the teachers show up less and less, right, through time. And as we progress to our current time, you see more people, like, consider the possibility that people are awakening to the possibility that Jesus, what he said, that even the least amongst you will be one day greater than me, that we're all here training on this plane of existence, this continual dream that we're having, and to grow and to learn the way, the truth, the light, to become what Jesus is telling us we will become. And so I believe that 100% that Jesus is the Son of God, that he is telling the truth, and it's up to your interpretation based on your frequency. Because let me ask you this: you're not much of a, it seems like a spiritual person, but have you ever opened a spiritual book like the Bible on psychedelics? Because for me, a lot of the things that maybe I didn't understand before, they were illuminated through psychedelic use. Have you ever done that before?
I have, yeah. Like, I haven't gone through the Bible specifically, but I know that like, if I'll listen to passages from the Bible, or I used to when I was tripping, and definitely Buddhism. I remember I'd have like lectures from Buddhists and that sort of stuff playing, and you're absolutely right. Like when you're tripping, like it just opens you up. So like it's always around you, like all of these lessons and all of this beauty is always around you. But as soon as you have that open mind, you can just understand it on a completely different level and resonate with it on a completely different level when you're on psychedelics, for sure.
Yeah. I think another thing with psychedelics is they find you when you're ready. Like the saying is, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And that could be obviously a literal person, or it could be, you find my meme account, like you learn something from my meme. You reach, you reached an energetic state internally where the universe, through whatever means, has given you your answer. And it could be through psychedelics. And so people that are seeking psychedelics and are not receiving them, I don't think you have to work really hard to get them. I think God can put them in your reality when you're ready for them. And so I don't know what you think about stuff like that. And also I wanted to ask you about, like, almost every trip I have, I experience heightened synchronicity afterwards. And my theory on synchronicity is God has a path laid out for you that's perfect. And if you walk this path perfectly somehow, we're not perfect, but the closer we get to this plan that God's got laid out for us, that we experience it more like a ride, and there's nothing to be afraid of, and you actually enjoy, the challenges and the things that God is going to, you don't have any fear. Like one thing, psychedelics has taken away fear from me in a lot of ways, especially death. And the ability to like take that leap of faith where most people won't just jump into the abyss and expect to be caught. But I not only know I'm going to be caught, but I'm going to be elevated by trying to elevate myself and the people around me through truth. So synchronicity and psychedelic use, what do you think? What's your experience with that?
Well, same thing here. Synchronicities ramp up tenfold when I'm on psychedelics. I think it's because one element of, like, I think reality is much more of a reflection than we realize. Like the law of attraction could also be the law of reflection. It's like where you're at, that's being expressed in the outside world, or not even expressed. It's like you are the outside world. You guys are connected more than you realize. So it's like when you trip, it's almost kind of like trying to remind you of that sort of thing. And that's why a lot of people will say they were listening to a song when they were having, when they took acid or mushrooms, and it was just the perfect song for them. It seemed to be relating to exactly what they're going through. But you'll find that can really happen with just about any song. Like that can happen with the TV show you're watching. That can happen with,
dude. Yes.
You just,
that's my favorite thing about acid is watching TV or getting on something that is supposed to be, you're right. That's how you experience synchronicity actually more, is you try to avail yourself to a random number generator. For example, I like to go to an airport, or just changing the channels, right? That's supposed to be random. Like I love tripping and watching TV and changing the channel because somehow the TV is matching my mental frequency, and it's unbelievable. I'm like, that's unbelievable. It's like, wow. And it truly does, to me at least, prove that my mentality, my mental makeup, I've learned, and it's my belief that reality is created in the mind. And there's also this, your heart energy and your karma, if you believe that, like what you come here to do, it all kind of comes together to create your reality that you're experiencing. And psychedelic use just proves that it's a mentation, because how is the TV which is supposed to be completely random? Or how are the people at the airport or the mall? Like, I love going to the mall, or like I said, you go into you try to avail yourself to a place or a condition that supposedly is random. And,
Right.
and another way to experience more synchronicity is to, like, for example, if you live a lifestyle and you just sit at home and you don't really avail yourself to chaos, then you're not going to, the more perceived control you have over of a reality, the less synchronicity. Because I think also
Yeah.
synchronicity comes out of like letting go and trying to experience the wonder. And so, yeah,
Right.
but exactly, synchronicity proves to me that there is a mental aspect of reality creation.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what the whole mathematician dude I was mentioning before, that's what he was saying. He was like, literally, like, we're looking at the code of this reality, and it's looking like everything that we think is real reality outside of us is actually an aspect of our mind. Like, it's literally our belief system is shaping our reality, and that that's how it goes. Like, just as you were talking about with the gorilla video, it's like, if as soon as you are programmed to be looking for the gorilla, you see it instantly. Before you're programmed to look for the gorilla, you see a completely different video. And that's what we're all doing, is like, at the very least, these experiences can show you that um, that your reality is going to reflect what you are looking for and where you're at, because it's like, when you're tripping and you're watching TV, all of a sudden, like, the person in the film, they'll say like, "Oh, things are about to get, very hectic. I hope you're holding on, like, and just be prepared to let go." And maybe in the film they're talking about the fact that they're about to, like, maybe they're sailing and they're about to, come into contact with like a giant tidal wave or some crap like that. But for you, in the moment while you're tripping, they're speaking to exactly what you're going through. And then you'll have a thought, and a friend that you're with will make a comment and it'll reflect exactly the thought you're having. You're just
Dude, yes.
completely, yeah, you're constantly just interpreting the things around you to relate to what you're going through. And I say interpret, but like, when you're in that moment, it really is kind of relating to what you're going through. Like, everything is
Yeah.
actually relating to what you're going through. And I
It's
think
spooky if you don't know it,
it's
if you don't know
spooky.
what it is.
It is.
Yeah.
It is 100%. It's spooky, and that's what I think is constantly happening. Like, I think we're doing that. Like, that's happening when we're sober as well. We're just not as conscious, as aware of
Yes,
it.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I'll give you a good example. This is kind of a crude story, but it's very truthful. I, a couple years ago, was doing a no fap challenge, right? Don't jerk off as long as possible. And just to see, like, is there any truth to this? Am I going to experience more testosterone, heightened energy levels? Am I going to think sharper? I just always, somebody tells me something, if it's not disgusting, I'll try to do it. I'm not. That's why I haven't drank my own urine yet, because I'm just, like, everybody's like, you got to drink your urine, man. I'm like, I can't get
Not
past
yet.
the gag reflex for me, but maybe one day.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
my story is this: I had gone like 104 days without jerking off, any kind of like sexual stimulation, and I was tripping one night, and the
That's
acid
amazing.
and the acid was like, the acid's like, you need to stop this. This is kind of ridiculous. And I don't know if it was the a devil trying to tell me to stop doing it, or if it was like a truthful like entity being like, this is kind of extreme. And so I'm like, okay, entity, what else do you want me to do? The entity's like, why don't you just watch a little porn? I'm like, entity, I don't think I can even get hard. And they're like, oh, don't worry, we'll help you out. And so I don't even remember what I was watching. And I get into it, and I don't know how long it was. It could have been 5 minutes, could have been 5 hours. But long
Yeah.
story short, the minute I finally reached climax, like in the movie, like in the porn, the women in the movie were like, "Oh my God." Like, the minute I came, they're like, "Oh my God, we never thought you were ever gonna come. Like, we were so happy you came." I'm like, "This is
Wow.
this is exactly." It was like perfectly
So crazy.
matching. I didn't know that it was a completely random porno. I didn't even expect to be doing that night, but the
Yeah.
LSD was challenging me. It was like, you're this is excessive. Like, you need to release a little bit of this. And
Yeah.
when that happened, I was like dying laughing. I couldn't believe it. Like, it blew my
Yeah.
mind how synchronized it was to my state of being, with it, that this random
Yeah.
porno was like at the end of it, where the guy finally blew his load. It was like, and again, sorry to be crude, people, but this is why you tune into me, because you want to hear these truthful stories. And I know people experience these things. They're just never going to tell anybody because they're just too
Yeah.
embarrassed, or it's just too crude. I get it. But yeah, that's kind of and I have
As
many
a perfect
stories like that.
example.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now,
that's
I wanted to
crazy.
ask you about what is the LSD Truman Show effect? Yeah, I know
Well, that's
you have a video
yeah,
about that. Yeah.
yeah. This is pretty much it. It's
Okay.
like because this is the threshold Truman Show effect, I'd say, and then it's all of the same nature where it's kind of you start going a little bit more like what people would start calling schizophrenic or something like that, where you feel like everybody's been watching you your whole life and you feel like there's a helicopter in the sky and that you're being broadcast to the entire world. You can literally feel cameras on you and like a mic in the background. Like you feel like you're literally like that was why I stripped naked and ran through the streets, because I was like, oh, I'm on the Truman Show. Like it doesn't matter what I do.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like this, like we can flip the script. We're writing the script. Like we do whatever we want now, because I can do whatever I want. Like I'm you know, that's what it was. And I think the Truman Show effect is when the ego gets a little bit too involved with like the spiritual awakening. And the spiritual awakening, the truth that's coming from it, at least in my opinion, is that we're all in touch with God. We've got this, as you were saying, this spark of divinity inside of us. This element of we're all the chosen person. We're all creating our own universe, which is why, like reality is reflecting where we're at. Like we're literally living inside our mind. Like this is your story and you should live it how you want to live it. Don't devote yourself to the judgments of other people. Don't hold yourself back from being authentic out of fear of judgment, when the perceived judgment of other people are really just like figments of your own imagination. Like that, it's not to say other people aren't
Yes.
real, but it's
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean?
Dude,
Yeah.
that's one of those things about high level psychedelic use, and especially consistently, where you start to get a like understanding of the kind of layout of how these things will play out. Because initially you start using psychedelics, it's like, are these real demons, or is this like, what is this? But it takes a few times, and again, this is why I push the float tank. It really helps you understand these things quicker. Like I would
Right.
never have the understanding of psychedelics if I was just going to be randomly taking acid or mushrooms here and there without really any intention to kind of understand, and then using like the ultimate tool of stillness. Because I think, forget it, even psychedelics or not, if stillness is the key. Be still and know God, right? To enter the inner kingdom of what Christ, like the kingdom of heaven is within, and to enter into that kingdom, the world is so it's so much assault with your senses, with food and TV and internet and phone and pornography. It's a consistent assault on your senses, and it's very hard for a person who is really walking a consistent like Western lifestyle that isn't tuned into these things to ever access them, because it requires stillness, and the world is not really beneficial in like helping you get there, right? You have to really work. You have to sit in a cave, or you have to like remove
Yeah.
yourself from society. So that's why I offer the float tank to help people. And again, you don't need psychedelics. Your mind is a powerful thing.
Yeah.
But the psychedelics, I believe, help you break down these egotistical barriers you've created, or faulty systems of belief that you've taken to their like nth degree, where they're not actually working for you anymore. There's maybe even a falsehood to it. And the psychedelics break all these things down and say that this is true, this is false, this is the direction you need to go in, and it's on you to do it. We're not gonna solve your
Yeah.
problems. We're just gonna show you where you're misaligned, or you've got blockages, and you need to go out there and work on it.
Yeah.
And dude, you get it. And like, I'm not saying that people who do psychedelics every once in a while don't get it, but you really have to give these things some time. And again, like, I could be wrong. I could be saying, you know what, this demon's really long conned me to like get on, to get
I don't think
online,
so.
and I don't think so either. But the demon's really long conned me here to be its promoter, and so it's giving me some insight, it's giving me some notoriety, it's giving me whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's doing a terrible job, because I mean, I was already on the path to like complete atheism, and that was only getting reinforced before psychedelics. You know what I mean? So,
Right. I've
because I hear Christians all the time being like, like this is, and myself, I've started. My brother's extremely Christian, and I've gone to church with him a few times. I'm quite open to it, but at the same time, I'm just like, if these entities that we're meeting on psychedelics are demons, they are literally doing a horrible job because they are converting a lot of atheists to being religious or at least open-minded to the the concept of God. But for me, I remember my brother, he actually thought they were demons himself. He was convinced these entities I was talking to were demons. And so he said to me, he wanted to come over once. And I said, oh, look, man, I was actually marked this this date off as a night that I'm going to do DMT. Because I do it, like, I haven't done psychedelics for a long time, but when I do it, it's quite infrequent. But like I want to, kind of like to be a special event. And so I was like, I'm not going to change this day like last minute. So if you want to come over, you can. You're just going to have to like trip sit me while I'm on DMT. He was like, okay, I'll do it. But you have to listen to this song, the specific song, because I feel like it's very like guided by like Jesus. And it's like I think it was like a tongues, the guy, he sings in tongues at some point. So I was like, yeah, sure. I'm down for it. Let's do it. And so I plug in this the song and smoke some DMT, and it's freaking beautiful, man. Like listening to Christian music on DMT was wonderful. Like I should be doing it way more. You know what I mean? Because this music is made to get you on that like higher frequency, that higher level, and so straight away it's just religious and gorgeous. But at some point, do you know much about like the DMT operating table?
I've been on the DMT operating table, unfortunately.
You have?
Oh my God.
Unfortunately.
I never went back because of that. I haven't been back since the DMT operating table. It was bad. So tell me about it then. What is the DMT?
Okay, I'll talk about mine, then we'll go on to yours. For me, it was a positive thing. Unless it was, maybe mine was different. But at some points, I just remember I was on something like an operating table. I was lying down, and then a couple of these like light beings just like descended from above me. And one of them, it was like a chick. She was like doing some work on my eye. And I remember I had some tension in my eye, and she just like released the tension. I could feel that physical relief, sorry. And then the guy, when the whole procedure was over, he like put one hand on my forehead and the other hand on my heart. And I still had like the music playing. And then he like ascended with the others. And as soon as I opened my eyes, my brother like walked over, and then he put one hand on my heart, the other hand on my forehead in exactly the same position, and just stood there above me and just started praying. I was like, this is strange. Like this connection is so strange. But anyway, afterwards I told him about the experience, and then he was convinced that the entities were angels, and I was just calling them the wrong thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Mine was complete opposite of that. So I've actually been there a few times, and one time it wasn't on DMT, it was in the float tank, and that was a good experience, but I'm gonna tell you about the bad one. Right. So this was my last breakthrough experience, and it was probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and I haven't gone back since because I've been trying to like do the work. But what happened was, I was peak, and I've kind of reached that peak again over the past few months, which is why I quit. But I finally I finally understood it, and that's another story for another time. But this was 3 or 4 years ago. It was peak marijuana use, and I was really excessive with the cartridges and the dabbing, like the crack of weed, basically.
Yeah.
And I'm with this girl, and DMT comes along when it wants to. It really does. I believe that. And she had some DMT, and she's like, you want to do this? I go, honestly, no, I don't. I'm terrified. And we didn't have like a crack pipe or whatever. We didn't have like a proper pipe to do it. So we had to do the sandwich method, which is you take some weed and you put some DMT in between it, because you can't put direct heat to DMT because it'll just burn it, right? So you need to kind of vaporize it. And so when you do the sandwich method, unfortunately, you're smoking weed as well. Or fortunately, some people like that. For me, it wasn't a good thing, because I was taken to like, it seemed like the year 3000, and I was on an operating table, but I was a baby or a child. I was very young, and I had green, and I was green, and I had green coming out of every orifice: my ears, my nose, my tear ducts, my mouth. I was shitting it out. I was peeing it out. Green, 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 green. Now, obviously, this is a very subjective message for me. I got it immediately, which was, I'm, too much weed. Like I am just drowning in it. And so that's been my journey for the past 3 or 4 years is, I went back to acid, same thing. I didn't go on the operating table for weed, but it was like, don't come here anymore. Like you know everything you need to know about the mechanisms of these things, but we can't take you any further. until you do the necessary work. And
Right.
and I don't know if you believe this or not, but apparently marijuana is a female spirit, and so is ayahuasca, aka
Oh yeah,
DMT,
yeah,
right? And they're
yeah.
very, supposedly they're jealous of each other, right? So like an ayahuasquero will tell you it's called a dieta, and you shouldn't engage in sex, you shouldn't smoke marijuana, you should avoid certain foods because of the nature of what ayahuasca is going to do to you. Like for example, the reason you don't want to eat certain foods is there's a certain level of density to that, I believe, which if you're eating cheeseburgers right before an ayahuasca experience, there's going to be a level of density that the ayahuasca has to break through. And in doing
Mm,
that, you're not going to get as deep of an experience. So the dieta is saying, clear the table of everything so we can have full power. Instead of ayahuasca cleaning up your shitty lifestyle, it'll just go straight to the point. But and the reason for sex is the entities supposedly can jump from people to people. Like we share energy fields when we connect, obviously, and especially post ayahuasca, you're very open potentially
mm.
to these entities that are moving around other people. I mean, one time I was in a bar and I was just stoned. I wasn't like I didn't really drink at the time, but I was around a bunch of people who were extremely drunk, and I was just stoned, sitting there watching these spirits, and that's what they call liquor spirits, by the way. Um,
Mm.
Jump from person to person, like just jump out of their body and just jump onto the next person. This was just in a bar drinking. And so
Hectic.
I came to understand that there was a potential truth to this ayahuasca like spirit experience, and that the reason these ayahuasqueros prescribe these diets, dietas or whatever they call it, is to maximize the experience and to keep you safe. So, in my experience, the reason that the ayahuasqueros say don't smoke marijuana is because the ayahuasca is a female entity herself, and they can be jealous of each other. So
Mm.
for that reason, I've never had the calling of ayahuasca. I've never, it's never been presented to me in an opportunity where I could engage with it, because I think I'm so, I'm still dancing heavily. Not anymore, obviously, 10 days out, but maybe that'll open up. But I'm not running to it. Like I think at a certain point you also you kind of get it. Like, okay, I could keep coming here, and I like coming into hyperspace as an artist, right? I like that. It's
Yeah,
fun for me, but also
yeah.
it can be very ungrounding. I mean, I had spent 6 months microdosing where I completely lost touch with reality. Have you had any experience like that where there was a negative, like effect in the real world because you engaged in maybe too much, or you lost touch with reality, or have you just been able to just keep it under control and been a good boy this whole time?
I think I've definitely felt like it's when I was taking psychedelics a lot, I definitely felt like my reality was changing. Like it was kind of like a non-stop trip. But I was very positive. Like I had a positive mindset when I wasn't on psychedelics anyway. Like
That's
those
like you
trips
you
had
you look
helped.
healthy in general. Like you look a healthy guy. Like some people just like they look like druggies.
So yeah, no, it like I felt healthy, and I felt like I wasn't in danger. I felt in control, even though like I had no idea what was going on. The way I looked at life was very different. Um, and I would say, like I was, I was still in a trip. I was still very like positive minded, and so I never felt like I was in any danger or anything like that.
I also have another theory as to why we're talking, because I have a few more questions and I got to start wrapping it up here. Um, that I try to be. There's a few people recently I try to get in touch with, and I realized I had an epiphany the other day that my frequency was so steeped in marijuana. It was just a heavy marijuana frequency that, like, people like you and my other friend that I was talking to match your frequency, I had to quit. Like to have this interview, I had to
How
quit.
interesting!
It's like a
Wow.
byproduct of me switching my frequency, that certain people were just locked out, like energetically to me, until I kind of get closer to your frequency.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
it really, I think there's a truth to that. Now, one of these questions I had was, you have a video here. What LSD taught you about deja vu? Now, I don't really think I know what deja vu is. I don't. I think the infinite consciousness that we are maybe might have access to the timeline in a weird way that we don't understand. But I've never been
Yeah.
able to really put it in a way that I could tell other people. What do you think that is? What do you think deja vu is?
All right. That's an older video, that one. So I'm gonna have to try and remember. But I, I think that, as we were saying before, the way we look at reality it's very much like a reflection of where we're at, but also I feel like we interpret reality with the highest technology available to us. And I think the fact that when we have deja vu, we feel like we've done this before. I think there's a reason to that. I think that's like a deep part of us kind of waking up and saying that we have done this before. I don't think it's just an illusion of the mind because our entire reality is composed of just different perceptions. You know what I mean? It's weird for us to have this one perception and be like, oh, that's just a glitch. The rest of everything else is normal. The only reason why we're calling it a glitch is because it's just slightly, it contradicts how we see reality. But the reason why we're interpreting it as we're waking up to realizing we've done this before, like it's happening at the same time as we're running these like metaphysical experiments that are showing us things like we can both be a proton or electron as well as a wave function. I don't know if you know much about like
yeah,
the
a
slit
wave and
experiments.
wave and a particle. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like we can be solid and in form and in this specific timeline, but we can also be in a state of potentiality outside of time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in that way, it's kind of like in the state of potentiality, we've lived like this life already. And it's almost like a video game. As I was saying, we relate things to the highest technology. So obviously, in 1,000
Right.
years' time, we're going to have a new technology to relate this to. But right now, I'd say it's kind of like in a video game, you have a mission to complete and you kind of achieve these checkpoints, but you're going to die quite a few times. So the character, it doesn't remember that it's lived this life already. It doesn't realize that it's connected to this thing called the player, this higher consciousness that exists outside of the character's timeline. It doesn't realize it's connected to this consciousness that is aware of this greater timeline. The character just kind of experiences the immediate moment, but it's doing things that it's done before in order to pass the checkpoint, in order to complete the mission.
Mm-hmm.
And in these moments, the character may have this resonance with the player, which would be deja vu. Oh, I've done this before. But I mean, obviously, that's just a guess. That's my guess to what it is, because I've had trips which have made me feel like I've had interactions with people many, many times. I remember once, I think in that video, the What is Deja Vu one, I had an LSD trip where I had this very unhealthy relationship with my friend. And I remember that I never had taken acid with him. And finally, I took acid. And there was just this like, I felt like I was seeing myself like split into lots of different dimensions. And I kind of could see a different version of me interacting with this friend, and we were interacting with one another like in all sorts of different sort of scenarios, but in each one of these scenarios we had the same unhealthy relationship. And then I realized this is just going to keep happening over and over until I do something about it. And so I talked to him and kind of like had a little breakup, and then we became friends again, but once we were both in a much healthier space. So it was kind of felt like I passed the mission at that point.
I've had experiences like that. And again, the takeaway of LSD is like we're all connected. We've lived these lives potentially many times. I'm you, you are me. You know what I mean? You haven't lived me yet, or I haven't lived you yet. I've been like, do you watch Star Trek? Do you know what the holodeck is?
I don't know.
Okay, well, it's this room on Star Trek. They have these rooms where they can go in, and it's just a room with a grid system on it, and they can walk into this room and they can say, "Computer, I want 19th century England," and they play the character of Sherlock Holmes, and they stay within this room, and all these characters just zoom into this space, and they're in 19th century London, talking to Sherlock Holmes and having these adventures, but they're actually aboard the Starship Enterprise. So a lot of my takeaways were this infinite consciousness. I'm an infinite consciousness, but I'm also you, but I'm in this void. And I'm looking through this thing and I'm experiencing my life as float universe, right? And I'm convinced it's me because I'm so unconscious. And this also will lead me into the question of free will. But I'm in this, like, I'm an infinite consciousness without a human ego behind it. And I'm looking through I'm in this like giant sphere inside the sphere, and there's like infinite slits. And as I put myself up to the slit, I can see, oh man, I was a black guy 100 years ago. I was a Chinaman.
Yes.
I lived in
Yes.
Japan. I was a
Yes.
Russian. I was a woman. I was this. I was that. And I had full empathy and I remembered these lives, but obviously I wasn't. I'm still this person here. And so I realized that yes, that past lives and we are all one. Like it's almost, if you haven't been there in these kind of spaces, it's hard to explain. But if you've been there, you
Mm.
know what I'm talking about. And this also
Right.
leads me to free will. So, and this will probably there's so many more questions and we'll have to do a part two.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
but especially when I get clean and start doing more psychedelics again, we can talk about some of these other experiences you've had. But I just want to kind of end with like free will. So my thought is I'm still out to lunch, like with my verdict. I don't know if it exists or not because I've had experiences where I am an infinite consciousness in a movie theater watching Float Universe's life. That
Mm.
and the implication is, like a movie, it's already been filmed. It's in the can. There's no editing, there's no action, there's no cut. It's just you're in the movie, it's going to play out the way it's been filmed, and there's nothing you can do about it. And in a
Yeah.
way, it's extremely liberating if that's true, right? Because it can sound almost defeatist, like there's no point to life. Just what's the point? But in a way, if that's true, that your life has already been filmed, you're free to just experience the film and not really worry so much about the outcome and if there's no free will, there's nothing you could do. And that experience was very real and it was very truthful. And the takeaway was that you're so unconscious in this theater that you're convinced you're the characters in the movie. I'm convinced I'm Float Universe, but I'm not. I am an infinite awareness in a void, participating in this perpetual dream that I wake up to every day. That somehow the storyline basically continues as it did the day before. Whereas in other dreams, it's like dreams are almost like a chaotic thing. Like unless you have an ability that I don't have, some people do to lucid dream and control it. But to most people, a dream is almost a random thing. It's almost like a psychedelic trip. You don't know, and you almost can't recreate it. So my question to you is, have you had an experience like that? Do you think free will exists? Do you think I'm freely choosing to raise my hand here, or that was predetermined by God? And or can they exist simultaneously?
Yeah, I think I'm also not sure about this. I'm on the fence with this one for sure. It's one that I'm kind of I was afraid you were going to ask me this question when you mentioned free will, because I was like, man, I really don't know. But the best guess I used to have was kind of like, if there exists, like if we exist on like this like third dimension with like linear time perception, and right now, you know what I mean, like the future hasn't happened sort of thing, but then you've got a potential perspective of a being that is at the frequency of light, and if you're at the
Yes.
frequency of light, you know what I mean, you are outside of our
The
time.
projector. Yes, you're outside of the projector. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's kind of like, for them, your movie has already finished. Like they could be watching your life through your eyes, but technically to them, like the ending has already been filmed. They can skip to the next chapter. They could preview if they want, because it's already happened to them,
Hmm.
hypothetically. So there's that. But with the realm of potentiality, it's possible that everything we could do has happened, and it's up to like the player, the person watching, to decide which version of like the universe or our like parallel lives we're going to be living and experiencing. So like we've kind of got free will because we can choose, you know, one of these potential realities to live in. And maybe like it's hard for me to tell. I honestly don't know, because maybe then at the same time, like they're choosing something that has never happened before. I really don't know. I don't know.
Yeah,
That's my answer. I have
I'm
no idea.
I agree, and I've kind of made peace with the mystery, which is there's some things we're not meant to understand, and maybe
Yeah.
even with psychedelic use, there's realms and there's understandings that if we could just have that understanding, then our current quandary, our current problem with free will versus not is solved. But because
Right.
we're just, that's like the termite thing, like the termite trying to understand its place in the universe. Like, what the hell? Like, it's not possible, right? And so for us to expect to take it to the next level, that we can understand the mind of God, I think is, I mean, I've read so many books, I've experienced so much, I've tried to understand the mystery, and what I've always come to the conclusion is enjoy the mystery. You can't
Yeah.
understand it all. It's a mystery for a reason, and just enjoy the ride. And so for me, like the free will thing comes down to like this too. It's like the Pirates of the Caribbean. I know this is a ride. I know that it's going to be okay, that God loves me and I'm here for a reason. I'm just here to enjoy this ride. I know the pirates aren't going to get me. The guns aren't real. But for the
Yeah.
unconscious person, for the uninitiated, you're very much in a life or death situation with pirates, and you could be taken captive and killed anytime. And
Yeah.
that's, and I think psychedelics help us break free from a lot of these things, that this fear conditioned lifestyle that a lot of us are just living as a manifested reality. Unfortunately, I think psychedelics have also helped me understand the schizophrenic mind, which is, if you start putting any kind of input into your mind, it starts to create a feedback loop. And if you believe it enough and it gets intense enough, then paranoid
Mm.
schizophrenia, that's where it comes from, which is you are stuck in a loop of negative or things that keep reinforcing the falsehood of your situation. But
Right.
because you are such, that you're just so locked into that truth, that again, that's the beauty of psychedelics, is pulling you out of that fear state, showing that no, 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 it could be, you're potentially wrong, right? So
Yeah.
that's my final thoughts really about free will and paranoia. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and then your concluding, your final words and anything you want to promote.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's kind of like, I don't know if you've seen Rick and Morty, but they've
Yeah.
got that the episode where I think it's Life of Roy,
Hmm.
where Morty puts on the VR goggles and he literally just lives this life of Roy, and he's living this life in like real time. He experiences like 50 something years, and then he just dies, and then all of a sudden the headset is ripped off his head and he's like, wait, who am I? Like, that's right, I'm Morty. I'm this boy. Where's my wife though? Where's my children? It's like that when you take DMT. It's like you literally, or like a high dose of a psychedelic, it's like removing the headset. You remember, wait, like that narrative that I took so literally, that was a character that I was living as. Like, that's literally what it feels like. That's why, to bring it back to the Truman Show effect, there are cameras and stuff around. And I feel like you feel like you're being broadcast, because it's like this, you're also getting in touch with like the actor mentality, where you feel like you're no longer the character who you were. Like for me, I was like, I'm not Jack anymore. Like, my neighbors are coming up and congratulating me, but they're not congratulating me. They're congratulating like the actor version of me. And they're congratulating me for remembering who I really am. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Like, we're all just like God, and just we're just having this experience. Like, we're literally like I took that so seriously, but all my problems are just a joke right now. And I'm literally just laughing and celebrating with all my friends. It feels like my long lost family. And one of the jokes we're making is that I'm just going to forget. Like, I'm literally just going to go back to playing this character, and I'm going to forget that this is who I am, and this is really the like what's happening right now. So yeah, I mean, I think it's something like that. Of course, we do relate these like mysteries with our highest technology, movies, video games, and things like that. And in 1,000 years' time, I'm sure it's going to be related to something else. So you always have to take it, with a pinch of salt. But as far as I'm concerned, that's kind of what's going on anyway. And beyond that, I'd say, if you are somebody who's had psychedelic experiences, and or maybe you are experimenting legally, I would say just remember to stay positive with this stuff, because like it's so much of it is really challenging, and so much of it is just like going to really change the way you look at reality. But none of these demonic entities or these mysteries have any power over you until you give it fear. If you don't
Hmm.
give it any fear, and you remember your strength, remember literally that you can always just let go and surrender. As they say, the universe bows down to the man who surrenders, and that's how it is. It's like, if you can truly just let go have fun no matter where you're at. It doesn't really matter how crazy it gets. You'll still be just a crazy happy person. Yeah,
Awesome. Well, I
yeah.
appreciate your time. This for you, it's 7 p.m. It's 7 a.m. now, and I'm gonna get up here and start my day. And I really appreciate the time you've given me. I'm so glad, by the way, to all the fans out there that kept tagging you and saying you need to interview this guy. And I'm like, yeah, I like this guy's vibe. And so, yeah, we've been trying to go at it now for a bit. And I'm glad, and one thing I will say about my sobriety, I've done like 10 podcasts in like the past week, both my own and doing other people's because I've just been so motivated. And so there is truth that I think there's power in sobriety. There also is power in these psychedelics. And I love weed. I'm never going to shit on it. And that's the thing. I hate it when people quit and they say, oh, no, this is garbage. It ruined my life. No, no, no. This is, for me, it's helped. It's helped a lot of people I know. I'm still exploring it, and I appreciate your truthful insight into these things because there's not too many people willing to talk about these things on such a large scale. You're worldwide, man. You're in Australia, and you're all over YouTube. So, how can people find you? Like, what's the best places to find you? Do you have a website?
I don't have a website. The best place to find me would be like I'm most active on TikTok at the moment. Just Trip Whip, and it's a picture of Marge Simpson melting. But otherwise, I'm also on YouTube. I post every now and then on YouTube and Instagram. But if you like my long form content, then I'd say go over to YouTube. Um, but yeah, otherwise on Instagram, it's just Trip Whip with double P on the trip and the whip. And yeah, one thing though, before we finish it up, I will say with the weed thing. Um, I was also the same. I was addicted to weed, I remember. And freaking man, it's hard when you quit. Like I remember being depressed, just not
Hmm.
like at night, just being sober. Like it sucked. And that was the moment I realized I was addicted. I was like, I can't go a night without weed, without like really craving being high. Um, but have you ever like considered or have you ever like used weed in the same way as like a psychedelic, like smoked it,
Well,
like
see that
really?
that's kind of been my issue is, I've known like Terrence McKenna would tell you the same thing, like do it once a month, do it on a special occasion, do it at a very high dose and make it psychedelic.
Yeah, yeah.
But here's the problem for me, and I realize this looking at other people with substance abuse. I can have one beer and I won't want a beer for a week. I don't care. I don't think about it. It doesn't bother me. But with weed, I can't, for whatever reason, I haven't been able to maintain that balance where I hit it
Okay.
and the next day I want it again and I want it again.
Right.
And then it gets to the point where it's like a cup of coffee for me. It's not really psychoactive. It's just keeping me there to maintain some kind of baseline of not feeling sick because I'm missing out on my chemical that I've abused. So for me, I want to get to that point. But I also, after 12 years of being nonstop, Snoop Dogg levels of smoking, I want to experience, I want to take all this insight I've gained over these past 10 years of psychedelic drug use and floating and apply them to the real world without the hindrance of marijuana. And again, I say it's a hindrance for me. It may not be for other people. It may be the most beneficial thing you'll ever do. So I don't discourage it, but I say approach it with caution like anything else. You might not be addicted to alcohol, but lots of people are. You might not be addicted to weed, but lots of people are. And there are physiological and psychological aspects. And for me, just to end the weed story and then how I got to this quitting point was just saying, you know what? It was the Alan Carr thing, which was, this is a burden. For more prior to me really quitting this last time, I couldn't really get to that point where I said, this is a burden. It's like, no, I love this stuff. I can't be creative without it. I need it for my personality to be like chill. But no, it was like recontextualizing it as a burden allowed me to let it go much easier. Where it's like, I don't want to be looking for a place to smoke or running out of money or trying to find, the next bag of weed. So for me, it's just good riddance for a minute, and then maybe, like you said, I can come back to it at a certain point after a couple of years. I kind of made a promise to myself to not smoke weed again until I made $1 million. So
Nice.
we'll see. Because the thing is, too, it's like my life is great, and I've kind of maintained a life with weed here, but I feel like my life could be so much better. You know what I mean? I want to see if that's true. Like, what will happen if I just break this cycle and try to take it to the next level? So I appreciate the conversation and the fact that you've also had this struggle. Now, are you able to do that now? Do you go back and do it once a month, once a week? Like, or do you just not
Um,
do it at all?
I see. I'm not tripping at the moment. I don't have the calling for it right now. I feel like I will at some point, but right now I'm in a period of like kind of just still integrating, like yourself,
Mhm.
integrating a lot of the messages. And once I feel like I've done that, then I'll probably start tripping again. But for me, weed definitely was like I think I went on holiday for a little bit, and I was forced to break like out of smoking weed. And I remember when I came back, it was a full on like psychedelic trip, and that's what stopped it for me. That's what like stopped me from smoking weed so much because it was
Being
like,
sober was psychedelic.
well, being sober was psychedelic, but also it was like this isn't just weed anymore. Like this isn't like just having a drink while I, chill out. Like this has
Mhm.
gotten to the point where now I'm getting anxious on
Mhm.
to smoke weed because it's like, oh God, like this is going to be a trip sort of thing. Because it just trigger flashbacks. So you might
Mhm.
find that like once you have that like solid break, if you like do come back to it and do like have a massive amount of weed all of a sudden and then just go dive straight into meditation, you'll probably like just go like somewhere hell hectic. And then after that, you'll be like, you'll rewire that relationship with weed. So it's just
Dude,
another one of the strong psychedelics.
you can't see it there, but goosebumps because I know that's true. And I've kind of thought that I'm like, I need to get to the point where I can go back into it and it's painfully psychedelic, where it's like,
Right.
thank you for, supporting us and promoting the weed message, but your time has been served here. And,
Yeah.
come back when you feel like it, but you don't need to come back anymore. Because that's the thing. I've had those. Okay. So I'm going to end it here, but I smoked in my early 20s for like 2 years. And
Yeah.
this was when it was illegal and you could go to serious jail time. And it was just, it was hydroponically grown where I was too. So it was very potent. And,
Yeah.
and because of the frequency and the inability to get it,
Yes.
the last few times I did it was like that, where it was just super paranoia. My heart was racing and it was like, this isn't good and I don't need to do this. But yeah, it's becomes like a cup of coffee for me now. And if I don't have my cup of coffee, I'm an angry, irritable little bitch. And so I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be dependent on any substance. And you're
Yeah.
right. So I will probably, in a year or two, go back and just, exactly reprogram that
Yeah.
relationship. And so Trip Whip, guys, follow him, Instagram, TikTok is
Yeah.
his main thing. YouTube too. He's got a lot of long form videos on YouTube, which you guys should check out if you're interested in psychedelic content. He's really good at his message, and I've been entertained, and I've seen a lot over the past year. So, Trip Whip, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Absolute honor, bro. I had a fantastic conversation. Thank you.
Yes, and we will do this again sometime soon.
Definitely.
So you have a
Yeah.
great rest of your day, my friend.
Thank you. You too.
All right, you are enlightened.
Take
All right,
it easy, brother.
you too. Bye bye.